We have some absolutely massive news surrounding Unitedhealth Group stock, which is now up over 7% after hours. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has just initiated a position. They bought over 5 million shares, meaning their position is well over $1 billion. Now, Unitedhealth Group, as you probably know, has been absolutely hammered in the last year, now down 53%. If we look at them year to date, they're down about 46.33%. Now, Unitedhealth Group has definitely been hammered, but they're not alone. There's a lot of healthcare stocks that have been falling year to date, but especially last month in July. In fact, if we look at Unitedhealth Group in July alone, it dropped by about 23.5%, especially after they released their latest quarter's earnings. Now, what's interesting about this recent quarter's earnings is they gave us some guidance as to what we can expect moving forward when it comes to things like profitability and earnings per share. And this is a lot of valuable insight, and we'll come back and touch on this here in just a moment. Now, what is it that Warren Buffett sees in Unitedhealth Group? Why is the stock down so much? Is it a massive opportunity, or is there still immense risk with this stock? Well, to really understand UNH stock, you have to understand the story of the last year. What's been going on? And to do that, let's start by jumping over to our stock screener and looking at UNH. All this data will automatically load in, and like always, if you'd like to download any of these spreadsheets and also get access to the ticker data add-on on Google Sheets that allows you to automatically import stock financials straight into your spreadsheet, then you can head over to tickerdata.com at the link in the description. But look at the earnings per share growth for UNH stock over the past decade. This is the reason they way outperformed the market up until the recent sell-off. Earnings were growing very predictably and at a very high rate, but then we saw a huge drop-off in 2024. 2023 EPS was $24.12, and then in 2024, down to $15.64. Why was this the case? Well, this is when it all started for UNH. They had a massive cybersecurity attack that led to a large one-time cost, but the key word there is one-time cost. It essentially lowered EPS in 2024, but it was expected that 2025 EPS would start to recover after that. But unfortunately for UNH, there's been more bad news over the last year. We have the DOJ antitrust probe. The CEO was unalive. They had a disastrous Q1 and Q2 earnings where they lowered guidance. They have the DOJ criminal fraud investigation, and then they announced a new CEO. So that's more news than most stocks will have in a decade. So it's easy to see why investors were so frightened from UNH stock and why we've seen such a large sell-off. But the huge question is this sell-off justified? I mean, the stock has sold off so much that the company is now trading with its highest starting dividend yield that they've ever seen. Historically speaking, that yield has been about 1 to 1.5%. But if we jump over to the dividend breakdown sheet, we can see that that starting yield is sitting at over 3%, and along with this has been a hyper dividend growth stock. They've been growing the dividend at over 16% per year over the past decade. Now, I do also want to mention, and this is really important to make note of, yes, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway did add UNH stock, but he's not alone in this. In fact, today was the last day for super investors with over $100 million in assets under management to file their Form 13F, where they have to release what their portfolio currently looks like. And we can see in the most recent quarter, the second most frequently bought stock by super investors was Unitedhealth Group. So Buffett's not alone in this. We've seen Warren Buffett, David Tepper, Chris Davis, all super investors load up on UNH stock in the last quarter. And to be completely transparent, UNH is a very small position in my portfolio, only about 1 to 2%. Now, I want to be clear, there's certainly still risk with this stock. For example, if the DOJ does find some kind of fraud, then I think it's completely reasonable to think that the stock could certainly go lower. But let me show you what makes this stock so interesting right now. Like I pointed out earlier, management is projecting that EPS will be about $16 for 2025. $16. Well, what did we see just a moment ago when it came to earnings? If we zoom in, we can see in 2024, it was $15.64. They're projecting that earnings per share will be higher than it was in 2024, which is really interesting because in the last year, we've sold off 53%, and year to date, we've sold off 46%. When a stock is growing earnings and simultaneously seeing large sell-offs, it creates attractive valuations. Let me show you what I mean. If we go ahead and jump over to our reverse discounted cash flow analysis, essentially what we're doing is we're seeing how much free cash flow is currently priced into UNH stock. Now, at the close today, it was trading at $271, but with the news of Warren Buffett buying, it's already up 7% after hours, so post-market, it's trading around $290 per share. So let's just manually adjust this to $290. Now, the question we have to ask is how much free cash flow is priced into this stock to get it to $290 per share. If we bump this up to 1%, it gets to $271. If we bump up to 2%, all of a sudden, we're already above the current share price. If we bring it down to about 1.5%, maybe about 1.9%, we start getting very close to the current share price. So what we can see is the market over the next decade is only pricing in 1.8% free cash flow growth into UNH stock. Now, to be fair, over the next year, it'll likely be a little bit lower. We might see a little bit of pullback with free cash flow in the next year due to rising medical costs, but this is obviously an absurdly low projected free cash flow growth rate for a stock like UNH, a stock that we can see over the past 5 years has been growing free cash flow at about 12%, and over the past decade, 16%. If we look at them from a sensitivity analysis valuation model, this is where you can see the potential for outsized returns over the long term. One of the cool features with ticker data is with the sensitivity valuation, we can automatically import the average analyst expectation when it comes to EPS over the next few years. And we can see the projected EPS CAGR from analysts for UNH is about 16% through the year 2029. That's very fast earnings growth. So let's just assume that they achieve a little bit below the projected EPS CAGR. Maybe they get to about 15%, which is still great, but below the average analyst expectation. Now we need to apply our projected PE ratio in the future. The average PE ratio for UNH over the past decade is around 23, but if we look at it for the trailing 12 months, it's now only 11.6, one of their lowest valuations ever. So let's assume we see some multiple expansion, but also assume it doesn't even get close to that average PE ratio. So we're going to be more conservative with our projection. If the PE ratio is only 16.5, you can see by 2030, it'd be a total return of 100% and a compounded return of 12.35%. But let's just assume averages. Let's assume they get that average analyst expectation of 16% earnings growth, and they revert all the way back to that 10-year average PE ratio. All of a sudden, you're looking at a 192% return by 2030 with a compounded return of 19.6. So purely from a valuation perspective, forget the risk, forget the DOJ, you can see why people think this is such an interesting stock right now. But the key is, what's actually going to happen with these investigations? Because if the DOJ did find some form of fraud, who knows what the case for UNH stock will actually look like moving forward. But with that being said, we're seeing insiders buy UNH stock. We're seeing members of Congress buy UNH stock, and now we're seeing the greatest investor of all time add UNH stock to his portfolio along with many other super investors. So this is certainly massive news surrounding a very controversial stock. We still have quite a few years to see what actually happens with UNH. This will be an interesting one to follow. Again, like always, if you'd like to be able to download any of these spreadsheets and also get access to the ticker data add-on on Google Sheets that allows you to automatically import stock financials straight into your spreadsheet, then you can head over to tickerdata.com at the link in the description. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.